Hi, I'm Rob from the Saddle Sore Ranch, and you're watching live from SSR. So one of the first things I need to do is touch up this paint, but that's going to be on a different video. As for the roof rack, originally I was going to mount it to these cross members. But then I thought, why mount it to the cross members when I can just mount it to these sliding rails instead? So I'm going to take these cross members off. It's pretty easy to do. There's just two Torx bit nuts here, and then this cap slides off, and then you can just slide these cross members off and out of the way. After you get the two bolts out, then there's just a clip under here you can get to with a flathead screwdriver. And there you go. Repeat the same process on the other side and we'll be able to slide these cross members right off. All right, so we got these front end caps off on both sides. We took the cross members, we slid those off, they're out of the way. Now we'll start working on how to attach the Unistrut to these factory slide rails. So to attach the Unistrut both to the vehicle and to itself, we got all these fancy brackets here. They make them, you pick them up at Home Depot or whatever, and they're made specifically for attaching sections of Unistrut. Now, if you're just gonna bolt it up just any old way using anything you have laying around the house, that's great. That's what DIY is all about. Keeping it low budget, doing it yourself, and making do with what you got. We went ahead and splurged on these brackets just because we got our Unistrut for free from a friend of mine. So since I didn't spend anything there, I figured I'd spend a little bit extra and get these special made brackets. So they are a little bit more expensive than what I expected them to be, but hopefully it'll make for a nice install. So I got some 90-degree brackets, these here for the corners, and then I got some T brackets for where I do some cross members in between. They also have different nylon nuts that you use to slide through the channel and bolt things up. We got some spacers. I am going to need to space this up off the roof of the vehicle just a little since I'm not using the factory cross members that you just saw me take off. Those have a curve to them to go along with the roof of the vehicle. The Unistrut obviously does not have that curve, so it hits the roof. So I'm going to use these just as spacers to lift it up on the sides just a little bit, just enough to clear. And that's it, man. Let's get to it. So one of the things that I bought was these special nuts they make for Unistrut that has a spring on the back. And they're meant to slide right through the channel there of the Unistrut, and then as you tighten them, it twists it a little bit and makes a firm connection. Well, as luck would have it, these little nuts here are the perfect size to slide right into the rails. This just made my life a whole lot easier to attach the Unistrut to the factory sliders. All I'll do is just cut off this little spring and I should be good to go. So what I did when I cut off the spring is I actually left just a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but I just left just a little bit, about a coil and a half, right where the coil starts spreading out. And I left that just so that when I do slide it into here, that little bit of spring that I left will push that up into the rail. Man, so far this is fitting perfect. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be taking sections of Unistrut as cross members going across, and they're going to hang off about 6 inches on each side, and then I'll run the long rails along the outside. One of the things that I did notice when using the Unistrut connectors is that you do have to cut them pretty precisely right in the middle of those holes so that the holes on the bracket will line up to the holes on the Unistrut itself so you can bolt them together. So just keep that in mind. So my measurements that I want here are going to be about 6 feet long and about 5 feet wide. But that's going to vary maybe ever so slightly, again, because those Unistrut sections have to be cut right in the center of those holes to be able to line up with the Unistrut brackets. All right, so now I got the springs cut like I showed you on these nuts here. And what I did, I went ahead and installed a few extra. So I put 4 on each side. I'm probably only going to use 2, maybe 3 of them for now. But that way in the future, if I decide to add another cross member because of something I'm putting on the roof rack, then it's already in here. Now, one thing I'll tell you too is if you cut the spring completely off the back of these nuts, they will just drop right in here. So you won't need to disassemble the whole thing to get more of these in there if you cut the spring completely off. Like I said, I left the spring on there, cut it down to only about maybe 1/4 of an inch sticking up to provide a little bit of tension. And that way, if you do leave about 1/4 inch of the spring on, you will not be able to drop it in and out. So it's just, I guess, a matter of personal preference and foresight and what you end up doing down the road. Now that doesn't mean that down the road, if I add something else, that I won't just, cut the spring completely off too and just drop it in there, because that's easy as well. All right, so a couple things I wanted to point out to you guys. As I mentioned to you, I took some of these nuts, I cut the spring, leaving only about 1/4 inch to give it some tension when I slid into these rails. And I slid in some extras just for future use so I don't have to disassemble anything. Well, one thing that I noticed is I had loaded them all into this front part of this channel here. And then as I'm trying to slide them back to the back, they don't get past these bolts from this center installation point here. They get hung up on those. So took it back apart. I'm loading 2 in the front side, and then I'll undo the back just like I did up here with these caps, and then I'll slide 2 more in from behind there and do it that way. Also, before you bolt these into the sliders, slide a couple of these in there. These are nylon back nuts that just slide in the channel and slide over to wherever you need them. I'm not real sure what all I'm going to mount on this roof rack yet. I'm sure I'll be adding as I go. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide a few of these into each rail just so they're there. And when I do add stuff to it, they're already there and I don't have to unbolt them. So just make sure you slide these in the rail before you put these bolts in. And speaking of these bolts that go in here, that screw into these that are inside this channel, there's a couple different sizes you can get that they sell. They sell ones for a 1/4 inch bolt, they sell them for 3/8, and they sell them for a 1/2 inch. So the 1/4 inch was just too flimsy. I just didn't feel comfortable with that, not for the primary mounts anyway. And the 1/2 inch was pretty hefty. So I went with a 3/8 inch, which I want to point out is the best size to go when you're doing this, especially when you're bolting through the channel here, because you only got a limited amount of room. So keep that in mind. So right here you can kind of see how I've been building off that cross member. I got one in the front and one in the rear. Just use these Unistrut brackets to bolt it all together. So there's a shot. Again, there's one up front, there's one in the rear, but then I'm also going to run a center cross member there, which is going to raise this up a little bit because that factory sliding rail on the roof there has a little bit of a curve to it. So by adding another support here in the middle going across, that'll put a curve in this as well. Just a slight curve, but it'll follow the body lines of the truck, which should look nice. Then on the corners, you just use these corner brackets like you see here, and that'll cap off the front of the roof rack as well as the rear. So, and this stuff is, I gotta say, it's a lot of fun building this, man. It's almost like building blocks for adults or Legos or something. If you get all the right stuff that's all made to go together, it just comes together so easy. Now, I don't have any kind of blueprints or any handbook or anything. I'm just kind of building this as I go. I did watch some videos on YouTube, and of course everybody has their own ideas and their own plans, and just do whatever works for you, man. But again, if you get all the right brackets and nuts and bolts and all that, it is just so easy to build, and you can just build whatever you want, man. It's a lot of fun. All right, guys, well, there you have it. Now, this isn't the finished product, of course. As I've mentioned, this is just a mock-up. What I'll do next is I'll take it back down, I'll scuff it up, clean it up, paint it. But very happy with the results. One thing to notice that I changed from some former shots was that I reversed the direction of these bolts. I did have them coming through the top down, and I reversed them just because I think it makes for a cleaner looking install. So again, this is just the mock-up. I'll add those extra bolts that are missing there and everything when I get the final installation done. But so far, very, very pleased with it. Went together very easily, and I think it's gonna be great. So I went back and forth with the idea of whether or not I was gonna paint this thing. Of course, I like the look of it painted, but the issue is it's all has a galvanized coating on it to prevent rust. So in order for the paint to stick, you've really got to get that galvanized coating off of there. Otherwise, the paint will flake up, and it'll just be a constant touch-up process. And on top of that, with the nylon-backed nuts that I put into those sliders so I could move around and attach things, as I add stuff to my roof rack. If I'd have put a coating of paint or bed liner or something like that on the roof rack, then I wouldn't be able to slide those nuts around and install other things. And if I did, then it would just end up taking the paint off anyway. So just in the interest of low maintenance, I decided to just leave it like it is. And with the galvanized coating, it'll never rust anyway. So that's it. Hope you like it. Hope this video helped somebody and gave you some good ideas. Like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you later.